Right now on the National Weather Desk, flash flooding. See how intense rain turned roads into rivers, plus trouble in the tropics.
Tropical Depression 2 developed in the Gulf of Mexico.
25 years later, a look back at devastating tornadoes in upstate New York.
The roof is gone. I'm looking at the sky.
We'll take a closer look at the connection between the weather and social media activity.
Other conditions that we are exposed to in our everyday lives impact our behavior in a much more pervasive way.
And why the way we fight fires could be taking a toll on some oyster beds.
Help us understand what the impacts of these new foams might be on our coastal ecosystems.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm Angela Brown. We are watching the Gulf of Mexico this morning, where a tropical depression formed yesterday on the first day of hurricane season. Florida meteorologist Lauren Oleski is tracking that storm and where it's likely heading.
The first day of the Atlantic hurricane season was yesterday, and like clockwork, yesterday, Tropical Depression 2 developed in the Gulf of Mexico. This is likely to be a short-lived, very weak system. It might briefly become a tropical storm, but again, it's not going to last very long. This is going to be making its way south through the Gulf of Mexico, approaching western Cuba by the end of this weekend and likely dissipating as it does. The wind shear in this part of the Gulf of Mexico is very high, so not a good environment for this to continue strengthening. I mentioned, though, it might briefly become a tropical storm. That means it would get a name. If it does, the first name on our list this year is Arlene, followed by Brett, and then Cindy.
Heavy rains flooded roads near Lubbock, Texas on Thursday. Several cars and trucks were stranded, as you can see there on Highway 87, overcome by the rising water. We do not have any reports of injuries or deaths, but more rain is in the forecast for today, along with the chance of severe storms that could produce tornadoes, hail, and wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour. The transition from La Nina to El Nino is expected to help keep lakes in the Austin area fuller. That's because with El Nino, ocean temperatures are warmer and they get more precipitation. Betty Cross explains.
Lake Buchanan normally laps up to the backyards of these homes, but not last summer. Thanks to La Nina, the lake was less than 75% full.
We weren't sad to see La Nina go away.
John Hoffman oversees water operations at the Lower Colorado River Authority. Last July, a shrinking lake killed off these zebra mussels. But the end of La Nina and a projected transition to El Nino means there is likely to be less shell crunching this summer.
May was very beneficial to our water supply.
But filling Lake Buchanan and Lake Travis is more complicated than having a dry La Nina gone and a wet El Nino on the way. A series of good soaking rains that fall in the right places is critical to raising water levels in the Highland Lakes.
Our rain needs to happen in the hill country out north and west of the Austin area.
Regardless of climate patterns, the LCRA is expecting a hot, dry summer.
In Utah, trails across the region are recovering from the brutal winter. Several are closed for repair, including one that happens to be a national monument. Ariel Harrison is outside of Salt Lake City with more.
Michael Ingalls knows the Timpanogos Cave Trail like the back of his hand. He's here hiking with his daughter.
I'm one of the daily hikers.
With the trail only partially open, right now he can only get about a quarter mile up. And while that's disappointing, he understands why.
I know they're doing this all for the right reasons, so safety is the number one priority.
These are images from the Park Service showing the sheer amount of snow and debris teams are working to clear on the 1.5 mile trail. Here's another area on the way up where the paving's broken apart.
As you can see behind me, the trail has been hit repeatedly this year by avalanches.
Cammie McKinney is a program manager at the National Monument. She hiked with us to the current closure to show us where the path closes off to hikers.
Even though it's been really nice and warm down in the valley, even here in the canyon, it is not melting the snow fast enough.
Hiking friends and cancer survivors Carol and Denise.
The mountains are calling and I must go.
Also spend a lot of time at the trail. They've been following opening updates closely.
It's been a great year for the snow, but it is kind of frustrating.
They are grateful some of the trail is open, but admit they look forward to hiking the whole thing.
Can't wait till opening day.
As for McKinney, she says they're aiming to open by the end of June.
As soon as we can get the trail open.
25 years ago this week, powerful tornadoes touched down in upstate New York. The winds leveled dozens of homes and caused tens of millions of dollars in damage. Meteorologist Sam Copeland looks back on the storms that hit north of Albany back in 1998.
It was a scene of utter destruction. Homes wiped out in seconds by winds up to 160 miles per hour. The tornado among the most damaging locally on record.
When I opened the door and looked out, I thought I was in a war zone. It was that horrifying of a look.
Our neighbors who were in the house next door, their entire house was lifted off of the foundation.
There were 68 injuries, but remarkably, with timely warnings and media alerts, 0 fatalities. Surviving such a storm brought a renewed sense of community.
The appreciation for everything, like the people who came to our aid. I mean, the whole town came together and supported everyone. Besides taking your belongings, it took a lot of relationships and that security of your friends. I think it was very humbling. And instead of thinking, why did this happen in a negative way, it's almost like, well, because this happened, it made us appreciate things more, be grateful for like the graces that no one was hurt.
Well, the warmer weather is not good news for everyone. In the mountains of West Virginia, the warm weather can mean problems for fish who prefer cold water streams. But local officials are aiming to solve this problem of warming waterways by replanting native spruce trees that were taken for lumber nearly a century ago. Meteorologist Brandon Stover has more.
It was a pristine native brook trout stream. There are pictures and stories of 16 and 18-inch native brook trout that came out here and stringers full of them.
Brookies still exist here. West Virginia's state fish is resilient, but they aren't thriving. This stream used to be lined with very large native red spruce trees, providing cover and keeping the water chilly for the fish. But these trees also drew attention from the timber industry in the early 1900s.
There was a whole city here. Their job was to harvest every tree, every marketable tree they could, and turn it into money. We're here at high elevation. You think, well, everything's cold up here. Well, it's not because it's wide open. It's a pretty wide valley here for the size stream, so it gets a lot of sunlight.
The best way to fix that problem? Planting and patience.
We got some hybrid poplar trees and some native red spruce that we're planting in here today to shore up the stream banks and to provide some shade to the stream to cool it off. These poplar grow fast. They'll grow to 50 to 60 feet high over the next 50 years, and then they won't reproduce. They're sterile, they're a hybrid, so they'll grow, they'll die, they'll fall in the stream. In the meantime, they'll provide some shade, and in that intervening 50 years, the red spruce that we're planting will be tall enough to take their place and replace that shade with the natural, with the native species. These don't necessarily need the tubes, but beavers love poplars, aspens, cottonwoods, all those kind of things. And what we found up here is they certainly like these, they like our hybrid poplars.
The soils aren't the best here, and the weather at 3,800 feet can be harsh. But these trees will still grow strong, and the impacts of that will even go beyond our beautiful brook trout.
We don't plant trees for ourselves. We plant trees for those that come after us.
Canoes and glaciers are not a typical pairing, but this week, a canoe from Hawaii made it all the way to the Hubbard Glacier in Alaska. The glacier is the largest in North America, created by tide waters at 75 miles long. The canoe sailed the farthest north it has ever gone by sailing all the way from Hawaii to the glacier. And this trip, just the tip of the iceberg. Next month, the canoe will start an around-the-world voyage that is expected to last 4 years. And a reminder to check out our podcast, Off the Radar. New episodes drop every single Tuesday. On this week's episode, Emily Gracie sits down with the brand new director of the National Hurricane Center. You can find Off the Radar wherever you get your podcasts. And coming up on the National Weather Desk, we'll talk with an expert about the connection between the weather and what you post on social media. And also coming up, we'll take a look at how wildfire smoke can impact people thousands of miles away from the fire.
I'm meteorologist Charlie Lopresti. Look at the Northeast. The heat is on in the Northeast again today. Afternoon temps will make a run at the 80s and low 90s again. The difference between today and yesterday, we're going to have a greater risk for thunderstorms in the Northeast during the afternoon hours. This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll have to keep a watchful eye to the sky. Now, that feature will work its way off to the south, and I'm hopeful that these clouds will break to a little bit of sun during the course of the day on Saturday. Skies will be brightest the farther west you are in the Northeast on Saturday. Enjoy.
I'm meteorologist Jonathan Myers, and here's a look at the mid-Atlantic region. Starting off with some sunshine up and down the 95 corridor on your Friday morning. Lunchtime looking good, but notice some of these spot showers and storms developing up toward Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, New England. Some of those with the next weather maker could bleed into northern portions of the area, especially Friday evening. But otherwise, it is just a blazing hot day. High at 92 Baltimore, 94 at Philadelphia, 87 Richmond, and 90 at Roanoke. That's the scene here.
I'm meteorologist Vitas Reed. Here's a look at your Southeast forecast highs for the day. Nashville, 91 degrees, 86 in Birmingham, Atlanta at 86 degrees, 84 Jacksonville, Tampa about 88 degrees, Raleigh, 84 degrees. Looking at plenty of sunshine for most of the area across the Tennessee Valley, Mississippi Delta, as well as the Carolinas. Just a few clouds off the coast, but we are watching out over the Gulf. This storm will continue to move south, this tropical system moving away, but giving Florida plenty of shower activity.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
Here are multiple sky optics in one photo. The clearest is the fairly common 22-degree sun halo, but below that is an infralateral arc. It's created by high cirrus clouds, which are made of ice crystals that refract sunlight like a prism. And it was a beautiful early sunrise over the Neches River near Beaumont in South Texas. You can even see some of the morning ships go by.
For more content like this, follow the National Weather Desk on Instagram.
Summer is just about here, and it's already warming up. That means more time outside and probably less time on social media. But did you know there is a connection between the weather and how you use social media? I recently sat down with an expert to find out how weather impacts what we do online.
We were able to run a global natural experiment with over 8 billion social media posts from Twitter. And we looked at how people express themselves in terms of their negative and positive expressions on really hot days compared to those same places on regular days at the same time of year. We found that during local heat waves, people's expressions in terms of negative expressions actually are amplified. So we see that sentiment becomes worsened. People become more negative with their wordage and also become less positive.
Can you give me an example of a negative emotional expression like in a tweet that you saw?
Some people use cuss words. Other people use just basic negative terms in terms of, terrible, bad, sad. What we find is that even, for instance, the utterances of things like happy, great, go down when it's really, really hot.
It seems like a lot of the research was focused on heat waves.
We've also looked at extreme precipitation events. And one of the things we find is that actually extreme precipitation, in many cases, it elevates negative sentiment by more than heat waves. Conversely, heat waves reduce positive expressions by more than extreme precipitation. So each type of weather has its own emotional signature on the way that we express ourselves.
What type of impact do you think this has then?
There's growing evidence that actually the weather conditions that we are exposed to in our everyday lives impact our behavior in a much more pervasive way. And our emotional expressions are just one slice of that broader iceberg that we're starting to uncover. In other research that I've conducted, we've also found from a global analysis of sleep tracking wristbands that hot temperatures, and specifically hot nighttime temperatures, cause people to sleep less compared to their individual baselines, suggesting that even how we sleep is sensitive to the weather outside.
And weather doesn't just impact how we use social media, but also sports. A major one, of course, is baseball. Weather will play a role in how the games will go, some of which may not be so obvious to us. Meteorologist Mitchell Combs is in Missoula, Montana, to break down these impacts.
As the mercury climbs and the humidity increases, the air starts to expand, which decreases the amount of density it has. This allows the ball to travel a little bit further because the amount of drag the ball is facing in its flight starts to decrease as well. The opposite is true on a cool, dry day. As that air starts to contract and those air molecules come back together, that will increase the amount of drag on the ball and decrease the amount of distance it gets during its flight. Winds can have huge implications as well. The wind direction and speed can change a ball's trajectory in flight. Strong winds directed towards the outfield wall can help a well-hit fly ball get just enough distance to become a home run. However, if you flip those winds from the outfield inward towards the infield, that long fly ball could just become a long fly out. Some pitchers use the wind to their advantage with their movement-driven breaking balls. Now, they do have one concern when it comes to those hot, humid days. The increased moisture from high humidity can make the ball extremely difficult to grip, leading to a loss of control and potentially resulting in more walks and wild pitches.
Oysters play a vital role in coastal communities, from the economics to the environment. But what happens when oysters are faced with hazards? One such hazard could be foam that is used to fight fires. Meteorologist Kirsten Clark is in Charleston, South Carolina, with a closer look at how foam affects local oyster populations.
Oysters, they play an important role within our ecosystems.
Things like oyster reefs provide huge benefits to us in keeping our harbors healthy.
Which is why Stewart focused his research on the hazards they face.
Yeah, so I started graduate school at the College of Charleston in 2019, and I came in wanting to look at oysters and oyster larvae and how things like personal care products that come out of our wastewater treatment plants can impact their dispersal and how interconnected the oyster reefs are.
That also includes how firefighting foam can be hazardous to the oysters.
So we brought them back in the lab, we cleaned them up, we held them for a little bit, and then what we ended up doing was we shaved off some of the shell and then we exposed them to some of the firefighting foam. And this gives us an idea of how exposure might affect the shell regrowth process and help us understand what the impacts of these new foams might be on our coastal ecosystems.
While some of the research is still unpublished, he was able to see how these new products affect oysters.
We ended up learning what some of the effects of these new PFAS-free firefighting foams might be if they end up getting adopted, stuff like that.
As for alternatives to the foam?
So the goal of our research has been to figure out if the replacements are going to be more of an issue than the problem they're solving. And our goal is to make sure that's not going to happen. We want things that are overall less toxic and less hazardous to the environment and to human health.
We are officially in hurricane season, so this morning we are putting your tropical storm knowledge to the test. For that, we turn to meteorologist Alan Sills.
Here's a trivia weather question for you. What do you see? Obviously, it says NOAA satellite. And this time of the year, I could almost bet that if you were scrolling through your social media feed, it would grab your attention. You would probably think that that and the rest of these are some sort of tropical system, a tropical storm, maybe a tropical depression. Well, it turns out that these three things have two things in common. The first thing is each image is from the last 2 months. The second thing, more importantly, not one of them is a tropical storm or a tropical depression. They are not tropical systems. They are regular low-pressure systems. And when you look at high-resolution satellites, you see way more detail than you used to see in the past. But the key message is here, when you're scrolling through your feeds, don't assume something you see is a tropical system. Read the description of it, and of course, a meteorologist can tell you. Stay updated. I'm meteorologist Alan Seals.
And if you're going to be in the Portland area this weekend, you may want to check out the Portland Rose Festival. Meteorologist Rhonda Shelby has a look at the weekend forecast.
This weekend, we continue a more than 100-year tradition in Portland. It's the Portland Rose Festival, featuring our first parade of the year, the Starlight Parade, and many more fun family events for the rest of the month.
It could be a little iffy this time of year, but this time around for Rose Festival events this weekend, it will be beautiful, highs in the low 80s as we continue our warming and drying trend from May to June. For the National Weather Desk, I'm Rhonda Shelby.
Time now for a short break. As we go, let's take a look at sunrise, a sunrise flight over Rappahannock River and Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Well, a very good Friday morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Andrew Buck-Michael. Scattered showers and storms across the plains, but continuing to stay dry for the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley. As we head into the day tomorrow, got still the same situation setting up, but it's going to be pretty warm. A lot of us getting into the 90s across the Midwest for your Saturday. How about Sunday? Most of us are staying dry on Sunday. Got a little rain down towards Wichita, but otherwise, temperatures will be in the 80s and 90s for Sunday.
Good morning, I'm meteorologist Alex Garcia. Here's a look at your regional weather. We're starting off a little humid all the way from El Paso back over into Houston. Drier and cooler as you get up into Oklahoma. The big story today will be a little bit of a dry line trough. This will begin to fire up some thunderstorms across North Texas all the way back over into West Texas. Otherwise, look for partly cloudy and hot throughout most of the afternoon. Temperatures will reach up into the 80s. I'm meteorologist Alex Garcia. That's a look at your regional weather.
Well, hi there, everybody, and good Friday morning to you. I'm meteorologist Shannon O'Donnell. June off and running, and so is some summer-like heat for the beginning of meteorological summer, I might add. A little cooler around Jackson Hole near Yellowstone National Park with a chance for thunderstorms and highs only maxing out near 60. But look at those mid-90s back through the desert between Vegas and Phoenix. You can see the next weather maker, this big ridge of high pressure, keeping the west coast dry, but the mountains with the thunderstorms. And that's the scene from here.
Watching the National Weather Desk.
Well, this week you've heard a lot about wildfires in Canada, but those fires are now posing a risk to folks in northeastern United States. Meteorologist Christina Ernie recently posted about it on TikTok.
Wildfire smoke is back in the Northeast. This time it's from wildfires burning under 500 miles away in Nova Scotia, leaving visibility near zero in those areas in Canada. Why is this smoke more hazardous to our health? For one, this wildfire smoke is way closer in proximity to us. So this means with just a slight northeasterly wind, the smoke is blown right across New England. What I'm showing you here is the air quality index. It shows you where that fire is burning and how it's affecting the air quality in the Northeast. So with other wildfires that we've been seeing burning in Western Canada, those are wildfires where the smoke is in the higher levels of the atmosphere carried through the jet stream. But this is in the levels of the atmosphere that we live in and that we breathe in. So this smoke can irritate the lungs and throat and even those with heart issues. So when air quality levels are at moderate or higher, it's best to not do any outdoor work or strenuous exercise.
And thank you for joining us. Monday on the National Weather Desk, we take a look at why, despite all the rain that fell this winter, some in California are still worried about drought conditions this summer. I'm Angela Brown. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here next week.